Welcome to Mobilize Talks podcast series, brought to you by Gilbarco Veeder-Root, Middle East and Africa.
Welcome to the second episode of the Fuel Files, part of the Mobilize Talks series. Hey, just to recap, this podcast series looks to explore the operational challenges facing anyone who operates a fleet or consumes fuel as part of their operations, with a specific focus on the Middle East and Africa region. I'm Sean McQuade, and today we're discussing a problem that I believe affects many organizations that operate fleets or who consume fuel as part of their operations. Today I'm joined again by Thando Sibindi. Welcome, Thando.
Thanks, Sean. It's great to be back. And I have to say, this is one of those topics that doesn't always get the spotlight, but it absolutely should, because fuel shrinkage is one of those silent operational leaks that can quietly eat into profitability while everyone is focused on the bigger, noisier problems.
Yeah, thanks for that, Thando. I agree with you 100%. So this is usually where we have our smile moment, but today we're not going to cover this again as Thando was our guest on episode 1. If you missed that episode, please download it and take a listen to Thando's smile moment from that episode. If you're wondering what a smile moment is, it stands for the single most interesting learning event. So Thando, you're off the hook today.
Absolutely, Sean. I'm not complaining, hey? I'll happily take the free pass today. But for anyone who missed episode 1, go back and give it a listen. The smile moment is waiting for you right there.
Great. Thanks for that punt. Hey, so let's get back to our topic for today. And as you mentioned, the topic for today is discussing fuel shrinkage. So fuel shrinkage refers to the difference between the fuel you think you have and the fuel you actually have. And I suppose you're wondering, is that a problem? Well, if they differ, then you've got a very real problem. And while the daily losses might appear to be small, over time, these losses can add up to significant financial impact. In many of the operations that we support, shrinkage can occur gradually, a few liters here and there. As an example, just 50 liters of diesel lost per day turns out to be around 18,000 liters of diesel lost in a year. And if we have a look at the 2026 average price of around $1.20 per liter, and that's before the fuel price shock has occurred, this equates to a loss of around $22,000 for the year. That's a significant loss. Thando, in your experience, how does this affect any operation that incurs these type of losses?
It affects the business far more deeply than most people realize, because shrinkage is never just a fuel problem. It quickly becomes a margin problem, further down a planning problem, and a trust problem inside the operation. When liters disappear without explanation, the first hit is obviously profitability. But then the knock-on effects start. Budgets get depleted earlier than expected. Procurement teams start buying more fuel than they should need, and leadership is left making decisions based on numbers that simply aren't telling the truth. And that's the dangerous part. Shrinkage doesn't just take fuel out of the tank, it takes accuracy out of the business. If you're using bad consumption data to focus, to budget, or to measure vehicle and site performance, then you're effectively steering the business with a foggy windscreen. So yes, 50 liters a day, as you say, Sean, sounds small, but when you say it quickly, it actually amounts to quite a bit. But over a year, that small problem quickly becomes a very expensive habit.
I couldn't agree more, and I think you've hit the nail on the head. You know, all those impacts, all those effects that fuel losses have on a business. And really, fuel losses we see can occur for a number of reasons. They're not always immediately obvious. There are obvious reasons that we do see, such as direct theft, but that's normally noticeable. You can see when someone has stolen a large amount of fuel from you. What other causes of shrinkage do you see across these operations?
You know, Sean, that's such an important question, because if operators only think about theft, they often miss half the problem. Shrinkage can come from very human issues, very technical issues, and sometimes a combination of both. Yes, there's a direct theft and driver siphoning issue, and those are the obvious ones. But we also see unauthorized dispensing, poor site controls, and fuel being issued in ways that don't match actual operational activity. Then you have delivery discrepancies. Maybe the supplier loaded one volume, the paperwork says another, and what that lends to in the tank doesn't quite reconcile. Sometimes it's error, sometimes it's process failure, and sometimes it needs a harder look. Then there's the technical side, and this is where things get sneaky. Underground tank leaks, line leaks, meter inaccuracies, pump calibration drift. These can quietly create losses over long periods without even noticing immediately. The fuel doesn't vanish dramatically. It just slowly stops matching what the system says should be there. So in reality, shrinkage is often death by 1,000 cuts, a few liters from poor controls, a few from equipment inaccuracies, a few from reconciliation gaps, and before long, the operation is paying for fuel it never used productively.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Those reasons that you've just listed there are reasons that are very relevant. And I've personally seen them occur across many, if not all the operations that I've dealt with. And this causes shrinkages in most cases across these customers. One of the biggest challenges is that many operators don't detect these shrinkages quickly enough. So, Thando, why do you believe these operators, why don't they identify these shrinkages early enough?
Yeah, in most cases, it comes down to visibility, or more accurately, the lack of it. Many operations are still relying on manual stock reconciliations, occasional tank dips, paper-based records, or disconnected systems. And when you're working that way, you're always looking backward instead of seeing what's happening now. If a tank label or tank labels are only checked infrequently and transaction records are incomplete or delayed, then discrepancies don't stand out straight away. They just blend into the noise or into the normal noise, if I can say, of the operation. By the time someone says something doesn't look right here, the losses have been happening for days, weeks, or even months. And once that much time has passed, the investigation becomes that much harder. Was it a delivery issue? Perhaps a leak? A calibration problem? Unauthorized use? At that point, you're almost doing archaeology instead of operations management. So the real issue is not that shrinkage is impossible to detect. It's that many businesses are trying to detect a live problem using delayed, fragmented information.
I really like that term there, archaeology, and I agree with you. The businesses that use fuel and run fleets are definitely not archaeologists. They need to be on top of their game. Margins are really tight in these industries, and if they're not on top of their fuel, which is the largest part of their operational expense, that they run the loss of not being profitable, and over time, ending those operations. So from what I'm hearing from what you said, that by the time these discrepancies are discovered, the losses have already accumulated or too much time has passed to enable the root cause identification of the problem. So I believe the real key driver to reducing shrinkage is early detection. So Thando, how does an operator achieve early detection?
So, Sean, I always say, I think I even mentioned it in our last discussion, that in life, there is the quick and the dead. Early detection really comes from joining the dots fast enough. On their own, individual data points don't always tell you much. But when automated tank monitoring, accurate transaction logging, and digital reconciliations are working together, the picture becomes much clearer, much earlier. For example, automated tank monitoring gives you near real-time visibility into what's physically happening in the tank. Electronic fuel management systems tell you exactly what's been dispensed, when, where, and ideally to whom or to which asset. Then analytics and reconciliation tools compare those two worlds. What should be there versus what is there. That's when operators move from guessing to knowing. Instead of discovering a problem at a month end, they can spot an anomaly within hours and ask the right questions immediately. Is it a delivery mismatch? Is it a leak? A calibration issue? Or perhaps unauthorized dispensing? And that speed matters, because the earlier you detect shrinkage, the cheaper it is to fix, and the easier it is to identify the true root cause before the evidence disappears.
So there you have it. When these systems that are available work together, operators can identify discrepancies within hours rather than weeks. And that's the key to success. Fuel shrinkage is one of those operational problems that often hides in plain sight. But with the right monitoring, reconciliation, and visibility tools, it becomes much easier to detect and then to prevent. So, Thando, thanks for joining me today. I just want to sort of close off by asking you, what would be your single biggest takeaway for our listeners today?
My biggest takeaway would be this. If you can't see your fuel clearly, you can't manage it properly. Shrinkage thrives in the gaps between physical stock, transaction data, and operational oversight. So the goal for operators shouldn't just be to catch losses eventually. It should be to create enough visibility to catch them early, explain them quickly, and prevent them from repeating. Because in this space, visibility is not a nice to have. It's what protects margin. It's what improves accountability and helps the whole operation run with more confidence.
Thanks for that, Thando. And to our listeners, really, thanks for joining us on the second episode of the Fuel Files, part of the Mobilize Talks series. Join us next time as we explore more of the challenges shaping fleet and fuel operations across the Middle East and Africa.
Thank you for listening, and stay tuned for our next episode.